Welcome to the Final Frontier podcast. This is Adam Mullen. Today I have a pre-recorded interview with Barbara Reeder of Star Trek Reviewed.
Just added a new film to historic Star Trek films of the 1960s and 70s. Just found a brand new film today.
Wow.
That was somebody bought some old 8mm film in a thrift store, and lo and behold, what did they find on it? Was a bunch of stuff from the late 60s and early 70s, and one of those things was a series of pictures of dolls gradually being moved around, and they just posted it. These people didn't make the film. They just found it.
Wow, that's really
But
cool.
Yeah, but judging from the rest of the time period, it was from the 60s and 70s, and I have a list, but we have a list. And one of the reasons these lists were created, frankly, was because the website was incompetently designed by me, because I don't know how to do website design. And so I didn't have room for thousands of fan films. I designed the website for about 250 fan films.
Mm-hmm.
So I started making up groups. Because how can I group them,
Mm-hmm.
so that I can put them all on one page instead of giving them each their own page. And so this one of the page 204 or blog 204 is historic Star Trek fan films of the 1960s and 70s.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the ones I found was I was just hunting randomly through something called break.com, which is like a very tiny version of YouTube. And I found a fan film from 1967.
Huh. Wow.
1967, and it's still the oldest one I found. And I was having a good time. People kept on posting fan film. Ray Glasser's 1971 fan film as being the oldest one. And I would kind of connect them to this and say, I don't think so.
Mm-hmm.
And it was like, ooh.
I'll have to check it out.
It's not very good. It's just, it's an interesting historic artifact
Mm-hmm.
in the light of the whole picture of all these fan films.
Mm.
But, I wound up trying to group them because, okay, I have literally 14 films listed here. And that way I save 13 pages. But there's no real logical reason, to do it this way. Except that I was trying to save pages, so. Because James Heaney's new website looks better. It's easier to read. It's easier to follow. It's going to be so much better and so much more useful. But he has two advantages over me. First of all, he's a professional web designer. And second of all, I've already made the list. And we know what the universe is. When I started out, we didn't know what the universe was. Everybody got to 100, 150 fan films. They got exhausted. They said, that's it. I'm done making my list. That's the list. That's my complete list.
Duties as a member of the board for Star Trek Reviewed.
Well, I don't think any of us have specific duties right now. Most of what I've been doing is just doing the upkeep and maintenance on the headlines, which is the new films coming in, which is both brand new films that are newly released and films that we find which haven't previously been included. And I'm not the only one who does the finding. Sven and Martin both find a lot of films. In fact, they find a lot of films I don't find and that I would never have found. And I don't even know how the heck they find them half the time, but there they are. Recently, I think it was Sven who found this absolutely fabulous film in Russian, which was newly released. I don't think we've ever seen a Star Trek fan film in Russian before. It was just the last couple of weeks. Brand new. New language. New source. And it wasn't that long ago, maybe 2 or 3, it was just a few years ago, that I got all excited because somebody started doing subtitles in Russian. And Anyway, but most of what I'm doing at this point is just the headline news and adding new films, and just letting other people know, like, our New Voyages blog, our page is completely out of date. We need to update it. They've switched around everything about where you have to look for films. But people are going to find Star Trek New Voyages stuff if they want to. We're not the only source for that, and I'm not super worried about that. But at least it should work. It should work, just like all the pages should work. The goal here is that you should only have to learn one format, and if you know the format at Star Trek Review, you don't have to learn the format at every single website, which is different for those who have websites. Not all these people have websites to look at their films.
Mm-hmm.
It just makes it easy. The whole point is it makes it easy to watch the films, and you can spend your time watching the films, not looking for them. So we keep in contact. I don't think we have. James is primarily in charge of building the new website. I'm primarily still running the headlines. Martin and Sven are assisting, as far as I know, assisting me and him. Like I said, they find stuff Sven comes to me and says, "Oh, what should I do with this?" And I'm like, "Well, I don't speak Russian." He says, "Well, I speak a little Russian, but it's not really good." And I said, "Well, it's probably better than mine since I don't speak any Russian at all." And he says, "Well, you should handle it." And I'm like, "You're saying I should go to Google Translate when you actually speak Russian?" So this is the kind of conversation we're having,
Mm-hmm.
because these guys all have better skills than I do. I just was a little more dogged than anybody else and just decided I was actually going to keep doing this. Everybody else got, okay, I have 150 films, I'm really bored, or I have 100 films, I'm really bored. And
Mm-hmm.
this happened recently. There's a guy at the Trek BBS who decided he was going to do a better list than our list. He said, Star Trek Review is too complicated and difficult. I'm going to do this really simple, easy list. I think he got less than 150 films before he gave up. Okay. I'm just going to answer this phone. You can, and tell my friend that I have to call him back later, okay?
Okay.
Hi, Trent. For the first time in my life, I am being interviewed. I'm on Skype with a guy named Adam Mullen. Is
Yep.
that right? He's in Oregon, and he's interviewing me. So, okay, I'll call you when I'm done. Okay, bye-bye. He's also a Trek fan, but he's, let's say, a little more intense than I am, which may sound strange, but I'm not a big rerun person. I'm not really enthusiastic about watching the same show 30 times, which is part of why I like the fan films, because it's something different.
Mm-hmm.
And some people they get very fanatical, and I don't think of myself as being particularly fanatical. I just like the fan films.
So, do you have a favorite Star Trek series?
No, not really. I don't have a favorite series. I don't have a favorite movie. Um, but I think this one is my favorite. Then I watch it. I watch some other one. I like that one better this time. I'm not. I don't know. Some people seem to really get into liking this one and disliking that one, but I don't know. They're all professional shows. I'm not. I don't interact with them that way.
Hmm.
Um, I didn't. Part of why I wasn't that interested in Star Trek initially, I think, was because the original series was very sexist. So, I guess if I have a favorite show, it's probably not the original series.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but it's not that I don't like the original series. There are things I really like about it.
Mm-hmm.
Each series has its strengths and its weaknesses, and when I get together with my friend who I was just on the phone with, he has every piece of professional Star Trek ever produced in its highest quality available in Blu-ray or DVD. And that's what we usually do. We usually watch Star Trek. Okay? My friend who just called. I'm like, I heard somebody was just talking about a particular episode in a particular series, and they were enthusiastic. So I said, why don't we watch that one? It's a TV show. It's not, for me, it's not a religion. Although there are things about it that I really like, and there are things that, in theory, I like about the community, although the community often doesn't live up to its own hype.
Mm-hmm.
In particular, the tolerance of each other, shall we say.
Mm-hmm.
There's a absence of tolerance at times, and particularly recently.
Have you been watching Discovery?
Not yet. I will pay, but not twice.
Mm-hmm.
So when it comes out on Blu-ray, I'll probably be buying it on Black Friday this November.
Mm-hmm.
I'll probably be buying the first year on Black Friday this November. That's the plan, and then I'll watch it while everyone else is watching season 2. And I think that's better for me because one of the things about running a website like Star Trek Reviewed is that I don't want to really get into fights with people.
Mm-hmm.
I try to be on good terms with every fan filmmaker. I'm not necessarily worried about being on everyone who ever made a fan film. But if you're actively making a fan film, I'm going to try to be on decent terms with you. And I'm going to try to keep my opinion. And it's not that I don't have an opinion, but I will try to keep my opinion to myself.
Mm-hmm.
Because I want to be able to get good information and accurate information for the website and for the people who use the website. And I don't want to get in the way of my goal there. That goal is more important than, hey, you took my money and then you didn't make the film or whatever. I probably didn't give you that much money. And if I did, it wasn't like I thought I was paying to support starving children. It's a fan film. And some of them are I think very, very interesting, and others are mostly interesting because it shows who the person making it is. The goal is just to make the website usable so people can watch them and not spend an hour hunting to find a 10-minute film.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a fairly trivial goal, except if it's your time, if it's your hour that I saved, well, then I've done you quite a nice turn, haven't I?
Mm-hmm.
And if I do that once a week, because once or twice a week you want to watch a fan film, then I've saved you a lot of time over time.
How many fan productions are listed on the website?
I don't know. The last few times I've tried to count, I've gotten over 1,000, and then I can't count anymore. I get exhausted from counting.
Uh-huh.
I know there are over 1,000.
That's quite a bit.
But I have no idea how much over 1,000 there are.
Mm-hmm.
But I say somewhere in the neighborhood of 2,000, but it's really just a guess. And it also depends on how you want to count it. I told you about this grouping that I have, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like one of the groups, which is, I'm flipping over. One of the groups is filmmakers who create CGI sequences without visible humans, like this guy who calls himself Rifleman 80, who has produced hundreds of films. I don't have a link there to each of his films. I just have a link to his YouTube channel.
Mm-hmm.
How many films shall I count that as? is it really a fan film when it's just CGI sequences of ships fighting each other or
Mm-hmm.
just ships doing stuff?
What
Is that a fan
constitutes a
film?
fan film? Yeah.
Right. And so it becomes a hard question to answer. I didn't feel that just these CGI sequences by themselves warranted me pulling every single one of them out. Here I am, Rifleman 80. I'm clicking on his video list. Okay, I don't know how many videos there are, but he's got to have, there's got to be over 100. Um, but none of them, there's no people in these videos,
Mm-hmm.
except a couple of places he does cut-ins from actual professional Star Trek people, which you shouldn't be doing. It turns it into a recut and a mashup,
Mm-hmm.
which again, I don't consider a fan film.
Mm-hmm.
And to the extent it is a fan film, I don't want to spend my time on it because I think it's more likely to be taken down since it is more of a clear violation of copyright.
Mm-hmm.
Old-fashioned standard copyright. You're literally copying the other person's stuff. Whereas fan films on whole are a violation of something called franchise copyright, which is a creature created by the court system after World War II. There was a lawsuit brought by DC Comics against Marvel Comics. Marvel Comics Captain Marvel, DC Comics said, was actually an imitation of Superman with his red cape and his flying and a few other things. And the court said, yes, indeed, even though there wasn't a single picture taken or a single character that was exactly the same. You violated DC Comics copyright. As a settlement, Captain Marvel became the property of DC Comics.
Wow.
And it is on that all of most of these claims about these fan films, many of which do not have any characters from, Star Trek, that this professional Star Trek, they've made up all their own characters. It's just set in the Star Trek universe. But it's based on that lawsuit that these are copyright violations. They're not classic copyright violations. They're violations of what's called franchise copyright, which is a creature of common law, which, by the way, is a system of laws in the United States and the UK and a number of other countries that follow the UK system. We have not traditionally had a code law system, although there are people today who are trying to adopt the code law system and turn the U.S. into a code, but that's politics, and we don't want to talk politics. But this is a creature of common law. So is Rifleman 80 films fan films or not? I don't know. If they're fan films, that this is over 100 fan films right here on this one link.
Mm-hmm.
If they're not, then it's 0 fan films. Are recuts fan films? Again, I don't consider them fan films, but are they fan films? They could be. Some people don't consider them fan films.
So this is why you have his YouTube account linked to your website.
Right, but I don't bother to link to all his individual fan films or his individual films because if you want to watch them, I've given you a way to find them.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm not featuring them because they don't have people. And but they are all original. Most of it's original work of him. Most of what he did is original work as far as I can see. People have tried to contact him to have him do computer-generated graphics for fan films, and he has not responded, to the best of my knowledge. He has not been willing to cooperate with, people who are doing live shots of people. You start getting into the question, if you ask me how many fan films are on the website, well, part of the problem then is, well, what's a fan film? At what point is it a fan film? I have one of my pages is a page of films about fans. How about a film about Star Trek fans? Is that a fan film?
That's a good question. So
I have a page of films about Trekkers, Trekkies, and general fandom. It includes everything from the documentary Trekkies, Trekkies 1, Trekkies 2, Trekkie Nation, a 50th anniversary film by Rod Roddenberry. I'm just looking down the list. Here's a bio of a real astronaut who's a big Trekkie. Here's a New York Times video about fan films. Then there's that very funny series, which was called Keeping Up with the Kardashians, which follows the life and story. It's fiction, but it follows the life and story of a family in Queens. But instead of being Archie Bunker's family, it's a couple of Trekkies, and he makes his living as a bike messenger. But he's dressed in a Star Trek uniform as he goes around doing his deliveries. And the family fights are all reorganized around Star Trek issues. It's got 11 episodes, and so that's there. Is that a fan film? It's a film about fans. It's about Star Trek fans. So part of the problem with the question is I don't know what a fan film is.
Does your website define that at all?
No, how would I? I mean, I can tell you what the website does and doesn't cover. It does include like this as a list, but it doesn't. These films don't each get their own page. Although they may get their own page on the new website. That's going to be up to James, because he's a web designer. He knows how to do this stuff. I'm not. I'm sort of the original data. I put together the original database, and now he has the database, and he can design something which is appropriate for the database. Since we now actually have the knowledge one needs to design a decent website. Like I said, when I started out, even if I was a web designer, I only thought there were like 250 fan films, and there are obviously a lot more than that. No matter how you define it. Unless you're going to say, well, it has to be only about the original series. And it has to be adult fans. We're not going to count stuff done by teenagers or kids. They have to have costumes and sets. It has to be, you have a certain quality and this and that. And, how are we going to draw the line? And I don't know. I just include it. And one of the things we'd like to do for the new website is we'd like to get people to write reviews. Because originally when I thought there were only 150 to 250 fan films, my plan was to write reviews for all of them.
Wow.
Because after all, but I could do it for 150 to 200 fan films. Once I started realizing there were 400 fan films, 500 fan films, I was like, I'm not going to be able to do this. And I stopped writing reviews also because it was more work than I could do just to keep up with listing them. It was like The Sorcerer's Apprentice. You ever see that movie?
Yep.
The fan films were like The Brooms and The Sorcerer's Apprentice. They kept multiplying. And my plan was to be in control, but it turned out I wasn't. And I just couldn't keep up with it.
And so now you're looking for people to help you write those reviews.
Well, that would be one of the things we would like.
Okay.
Even if somebody doesn't, let's suppose, even if you just somebody who uses Star Trek Review and you're just willing to do grunt work, we need people to literally populate the films in the new website. Just physically to check every link, because part of the problem is people move stuff around. People take things down. There used to be a film here, but the person got embarrassed. There was a very lovely set of films by a young lady. Most of these films are by men, by the way. It's very, very, very few filmmakers are female. By the way, very few Star Trek websites are run by women. It's a very male-dominated group. Anyway, very few this particular set of films was done by a teenage girl, and I really enjoyed them. They were animations. And they were very different because in most films, people cast themselves either as a member of Star Trek or maybe as some alien interacting with some kind of Star Trek characters. Okay? But there are movies like where Star Trek characters come back into whatever then is the present and meet local people who are living from our time as of the time the movie is made.
Mm-hmm.
That's what she did.
Mm-hmm.
She had Captain Kirk and company come back, and she and her brother she and her brother. And they were the current people who were interacting with Captain Kirk at the time that she was making the film.
Hmm.
And I didn't see any other fan film that did that. So I thought that was really cool. And it was one of the things I would tell people about, oh, you got to watch this fan film. And then one day I got a call back and the film's not there. And I checked, and sure enough, it had been taken down.
Hmm.
Anyway, I don't remember now whether it was Fenn or Martin, but one of them hunted her down. And they found out she was currently an undergraduate at MIT. So I figure she took that down because she wasn't particularly proud of it and didn't want people of MIT to run into it.
Mm-hmm.
And I can relate to that because I used to publish, when I was a kid, I used to publish letters in comic books when I was a teenager. And I sure didn't tell my friends about it. And I sure didn't put it on my Yale college application. I got into Yale and Princeton and went to Yale. And it wasn't something I spent a lot of time thinking about. And yet, years and years later, once I was on the web and I Google myself, I find my name popping up at, of all places, the Time Warner website. Why the heck is my name doing at the Time Warner website? And there I find people discussing and analyzing the letters I wrote when I was a teenager. So I think the day may come when we can convince her to put those films back up because we like them. They were nice films. They were not professional films. The stuff people talk about it, like New Voyages, Star Trek Continues, Star Trek Horizon. These films are all made by Hollywood professionals or people who used to be Hollywood professionals, or at least people like Horizon was made by a guy who's in television professionally, even though he's not in Hollywood.
Mm-hmm.
This is not that kind of film. This is a film by a fan who is not a professional filmmaker. But some of those films, like Nick Cook's films, Starship Intrepid now, used to be Star Trek Intrepid,
Mm-hmm.
out of Scotland, are really, really good and very enjoyable. But are they pro? No, they're not pro. But I find them extremely enjoyable.
Mm-hmm.
And, there are people who don't find them enjoyable, but that's not me.
So what about them do you find enjoyable?
I enjoy watching them. I mean, I enjoy the stories. They're all different, and they reflect the people. When people tell a story, they are always in the story, even if there is the character who's them in the story. I think Nick Cook's work is just good viewing. I enjoy it as a film. They're all different. They're all very, very different. It's what do you enjoy about them is too broad because they're all different. I don't even know how to answer that. I really enjoy seeing how people play with things and come at things so differently, and people have very different views, and they think the way they see Star Trek is the way other people see Star Trek, and it's not. So that for some people, Star Trek is about the utopianness of the franchise. For other people, they relate to it as they're very military, and they see it as a quasi-military story.
Mm-hmm.
And these people can often get into big fights in the community, in the Star Trek community, because they have such violently different views of Star Trek. People come at things very differently, and
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes, one of the good things about science fiction generally is that it can give you time, it gives you a way to talk about issues by isolating them out. so that it isn't personal.
Are there qualities in fan films that you dislike?
Again, you can't talk about fan films generally. Um, I mean, people's personalities are in their fan films. I recently came across a film that I thought was unusually poor. Okay, and my idea of what really poor is tends to be a much more narrow idea than a lot of other people's ideas. I've gotten into fights with fan filmmakers who think some other fan filmmaker makes really lousy films, whose films I don't think are that lousy. Um, and so I sent him this particular film because I thought it was particular. And I watched this film, and I really wasn't certain what they were going for. Were they just trying to be nasty, or did they think they were also being funny? I wasn't sure watching the film because I didn't find it funny at all. But they were very successful at being very nasty about Star Trek. So I left a comment under the film. I said, I'm not sure what you mean, what you're going for here. I want to say that if you're going for being nasty, I think you've succeeded magnificently. But if you're going for being funny, I don't think you succeeded. And so I got back a bunch of curses. So I guess they thought they were being funny because they were really angry that they didn't find it funny. But their response kind of reflected the film, too. The film was very angry. And so I kind of thought the response was like the film.
Mm-hmm.
These people were very consumed with their anger, and they seemed to think that their anger was funny. And I just didn't find it funny. And then, but at least the answer, although they didn't directly answer my question, they indirectly answered it. They apparently did think it was funny because they would have been angry if they didn't think it was funny, right?
Mm-hmm.
If they just intended it to be angry. And then they came back and apologized, and I assured them that I actually wasn't offended, that they clearly from their answer, they did intend it to be funny, and they now understood that was their intention. And so they didn't say, no, we intend it to be funny, but by being so angry that I didn't find it funny, every film is unique. And I mean, initially I didn't like, when I originally started the website, it was going to be only dramas. I wasn't going to have any comedies. I wasn't interested in comedies. I didn't like them. I thought most of the comedies and parodies I saw were just ridiculing Star Trek, and the whole reason I'd gotten involved with this was because I hadn't liked JJ Trek. And I know people like it, and I'm not looking for a fight. I think it's great that they like it and that they enjoy it. And, no, I'm not saying they shouldn't make it, or, it's not, CBS owns Star Trek and Paramount owns Star Trek. Anything they make and they say is Star Trek is Star Trek.
Mm-hmm.
And they are going to aim that at the widest audience they can get because that's how they make money.
Yeah.
And that's what this is. It's a money-making franchise.
Yep. It comes down to the money.
And I've gotten into trouble with people because I was offended by their fan films. There was a fan film many years ago that somebody put out where they had tiny little children playing the Star Trek characters. I mean, kids under the age of 4. And for whatever reason, I found it offensive. Some people thought it was great, but I found it offensive. But they eventually pulled that down and replaced it with animations, which they continue to make and which I think are pretty good. They may still hate me, I don't know, but they're making pretty decent films. There was a bunch of guys who used to work for Hanna-Barbera who are all retired together in someplace in Texas, and they were apparently bored, so they decided to make a Star Trek fan film. They made a 2-hour movie called The Paradise Makers. It isn't anything like the animated series. It's very different, but it's sort of what we would expect if Hanna-Barbera had made Star Trek. It isn't a comedy, but these guys are pros. These guys were making Yogi Bear and the Flintstones.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a 2-hour movie. I liked it. If everyone gonna like it, no. But it's not it's not one of the ones people talk about a lot. There's just a lot of ones that people don't talk about I'm trying to talk about mostly stuff that people don't talk about. There's a guy who has made a few films now, and one of them was one of the more recent ones was called Axed We Are, which is a takeoff on the CBS lawsuit.
Mm-hmm.
But the previous one he made was actually the one that first, I don't know. They're both fake puppet. It's animation, but it's animation to look like puppets.
Oh yeah, yeah. I think I know what you're talking about.
A Mutt Time, Star Trek: A Mutt Time,
Mm-hmm.
in which the original film is about 15 minutes long, and they treat Vulcan is Vulcanine, they call it, and they turn everything about Spock into a dog so that he's in heat, which is it's actually a pretty good analogy.
Mm-hmm.
It's a great little film, all of 15 minutes. It's an animation. It's pretty funny, and he's done and I hope he'll continue to make films. And that's one of the pages which are now on the new website, by the way.
Mm.
I just clicked on it, and here I am at the new website. And
Is that up and running?
We're doing it one page at a time.
Oh wow.
Because what are we going to do? It's 2,000 films.
Mm-hmm.
Roughly. Like I said, I just use that as a number because I really don't know. But it's something like 2,000 films. By the time we set up the new website, it would be obsolete anyway. We can't. It's just such an overwhelming subject. And I mean, I never would have undertook this if I had any idea how big it was. But I thought, I kept on coming across all these lists, a complete list, except they didn't all have the same film. So I thought all these lists had between 100 and 150 films. So they're probably between 150 and 200 films, maybe 250. Ha ha ha. Joke's on me. But the good news is, we've got one place you can go if you want to watch a Star Trek fan film. And all we really we need people to help move it over.
Mm-hmm.
We need people to write reviews. And frankly, anyone who's willing to either create subtitles in the language it's currently in and can create subtitles in a second language is doing a huge service. I think, in the whole community, the person who's probably done more to spread the ability of people to watch Star Trek fan films than anybody else is this guy Ulysses, who is in Sao Paulo, Brazil, and he has produced hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of, certainly hundreds of subtitles in Portuguese.
Wow.
And when he started, there weren't any original Brazilian Portuguese fan films, but there are now. Somebody started doing subtitles in Russian, and lo and behold, just the last couple of weeks, they've released a fan film in Russian. We have fan films. We have one fan film in Arabic.
Wow.
There's a fan film in Zulu. And yet there are no fan films in Chinese. Although Martin is working on a film in Beijing. I don't know what language it's going to be in. But we don't have any subtitles in Chinese, to the best of my knowledge. If somebody could just subtitle, some of the professional fan films in Chinese, they could think of the size of the audience which can't watch them now that could watch these films.
Mm-hmm.
The whole audio section from the beginning was the idea of this guy Alan, who goes under the name Korak Lestoke, and who is also on the board in Australia. And I wasn't originally going to include audio, and he kept after me, and I kept saying, well, if I finish with all the fan films, then I'll put in the audio. Until one day he just sent me a ready-to-load audio list. So what was I going to do? Not put it up? I did. And I then updated it for a few years. And at this point, he's the one updating it, and he's the one who's taking care of it. And he also is helping with a lot of other stuff. I know he's helped with some of the correcting a lot of the other blogs, which have fallen into disrepair. That's something, but beyond that, there's a lot more. I mean, he, to a certain extent, audio has been his thing. But for the rest of us, it's been much more catch and catch can. And what this is all about in the end, the big idea behind Star Trek Reviewed is making it easier for people to watch these films, to find them and to watch them. So whether it's helping set up the easier to manage, easier to use website, and the website which frankly is adequate to the job, which the old website just isn't. And, checking every link when you do that, because heaven knows a lot of these links go dead. There were these wonderful reviews that, quite a few of them done by this guy, Randy Hall, and for a while they were taken down, although it seemed like I was in great distress, and we wished we had made copies of them, and I even called him up and tried to get him to get them back up, and at the time he didn't know what was going on, although apparently some of the people repopulating the new website have found some of them, so at least some of them have survived. But if any of them were lost, that would be a terrible tragedy, because he did all this work, and reviews are something the community needs. So part of this is setting up preservation. I know that that's one of Martin's passions. Martin in Beijing is trying to set up a bank where he has copies of things, and the idea being not that we're going to give things out that the author doesn't want given out. That's not our job. But what if, okay, I don't know if he has a copy of these films from this woman at MIT. But what if she loses it? She not only took it down, but she loses her copy. And let's suppose she graduates and she has her job and she's a mom and she has teenagers, and her kids say to her, Mom, what did you do when you were a teenager? Oh, I made these films. It was ridiculous. Mom, we'd like to see them. Can't find them. Well, we'd like to have we would like. I don't know if Martin has those films, but we would like to have a copy of those films to say, hey, it doesn't have to be lost. There are lots of Star Trek fan films which have been lost. People always reference Paragon's Paragon, which doesn't sound like a great loss to me from what I know about it, but it's a lost fan film. I have a whole list of lost fan films. What's one of my group lists, which of course that you only need a list because you can't watch them anyway. And whether they're in existence in someone's basement or whether they're lost and gone forever, I don't know. But these are films that somebody at some point saw. And they're lost and gone, and I think it's sad. But like I said, Martin is working on that. And I'm sure he has much more to say about it than I do.
So, if someone wanted to help you, who would they contact?
Well, the best thing to do is to write to StarTrekReviewed@gmail.com. That way you reach all of us. And if you want to, and you'll reach everybody that way. That's our joint email, StarTrekReviewed@gmail.com. It's all one word, Star Trek Reviewed, all pushed together. And probably the thing that's most urgent is helping James set up the new website. I mean, the website is on the verge of collapse, the old website, because it just wasn't designed for what was there. I mean, in April, I didn't know there was such a thing as a fan film. And in June, I was designing the website. So I didn't know I wasn't a website designer. So on 2 scores, I just was not able I didn't have the capacity to do a decent job, but James does, and I'm confident that the new website will be much, it's already much better. It's just that it's not set up. But if somebody is willing to, I mean, when I say writing reviews, though, I have to say, I'm not looking for someone who's mean, okay?
Mm-hmm.
You can write a review, and you don't have to say something nice about something which isn't nice. But let me give you 2 examples. Okay, you're listening to this Span film, and you can't follow it because the audio was really bad. You can say, I was watching Star Trek Joe Schmo, and there are places where it's so dark I couldn't see what was going on, and I couldn't hear what was going on either, and I just got lost. That's fine. You give it a 1 to 5 scale, and you only rate it as a 2. That's fine. What I'm not looking for is Star Trek Joe Schmo is a piece of dirt. This guy didn't even bother to find out what sound engineering was. He really needs to get out of his parents' basement and go to a real movie. That's not something we're interested in. Okay. And for anyone who's known me and never heard me be nasty before, let you know, and anyone who thinks they're really clever because they're nasty, most people who choose not to be nasty, it's not that we don't know how to be. It's just we choose not to be. It's not that clever to be nasty. Okay? Then my view, at least, is that nasty isn't inherently clever. There are people who believe nasty is clever, but I'm not one of them. I'm not looking. Although the website is aimed at the viewer, it isn't aimed at the filmmaker. You have to be on good terms with the filmmaker to get accurate information.
Mm-hmm.
Just because his first film may not be terribly good doesn't mean his 10th film isn't going to be really good.
Mm-hmm.
Unfortunately, Luke Sutton, who works out of England, has taken down his early films. I think that's a crime, but he has. He started doing films when he was like 13 or 14. He's now in his mid-20s. I believe he's been doing Star Trek fan films longer than anybody else.
Wow.
Okay? Most people don't even know about him. I happen to, I enjoy his films. Somebody else might not. But I enjoy his films. His current films are pretty damn good. But yeah, his early films were a bunch of kids using daddy and mommy's camera to film them playing Star Trek. So the early films are a bunch of children playing Star Trek and filming themselves. And the recent films, they have green screens and they have costumes and they have CGI and it's the whole 9 yards.
Mm-hmm.
And he has this fascinating combination where he's worked in these. It's not a standard crossover film, even though you have elements of Doctor Who and Stargate and all this other stuff in his films. He's treated them different. It isn't a classic in a classic crossover. Darth Vader confronts either Captain Kirk or Captain Picard. Okay, that's not the way his films are. His films are about a guy who's a doctor, as in Doctor Who,
mm-hmm.
who's also a starship captain. And the Iconians are the people who have become the doctors in Doctor Who. And he works this way with all of this stuff. All of these other franchises that appear in his Star Trek fan films are treated have been brought into the Star Trek universe as part of it. He connects it with something you've already seen in Star Trek, and you calling it this, but it's really also that.
Mm-hmm.
And I love it. I love what he's done, but it's not one of the better known groups. Again, he's blog 90 on the old blog. I don't think that's been brought over to the new website yet. No, it's still the old website. His stuff now I think is pretty decent. But I like watching kids play Star Trek too.
Mm-hmm.
That's me. But not everybody does. I mean, I get calls from other women my age who don't say enough of their grandchildren, who want me to guide them to the ones that are children playing Star Trek. They're not interested in the press stuff. They're not even that interested in Star Trek. They just want to see this thing.
Uh-huh.
So those are the ones they want. They want the ones with children are playing Star Trek because they don't say enough of their grandchildren.
Thank you for letting me interview you, and this was fun.
Well, I hope it's fun for people to listen to it. What can I tell you? And I hope if anyone happens upon your podcast, that they can drop by who like Star Trek fan films. I hope they can drop by Star Trek Reviewed and save themselves some time.
Yeah.
Because they can hunt through Star Trek Reviewed they're going to find a lot more fan films a lot faster.